I'm bringing you today someone that we have been following online, on social media, and he has so much incredible information that we thought you needed to meet him. He is a law enforcement professional. He is a very prolific writer and a guy who really understands what is happening in the law enforcement profession today. Roland Clee, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
So give people just a thumbnail on your very interesting background.
Well, I had a great time. I was a community service officer with a large city police department for about 27 years. And I wound up becoming an instructor. So I wound up hanging out with the sworn officers most of the time. We really bonded over shooting one another with ammunitions and people dragging me and hitting me with an asp. And, I had an opportunity to go to investigations in 2001. And I was dumped a juvenile program, and I decided to do something with it. And so when we had some concerns during 2008, 2009 with the rising crime, the chief created a violent crimes office, created a violent crimes czar. And then everyone whispered to the chief, you better send this guy along with to that office. So I spent about 11 years with the command staff, and then I visited. I worked in media relations about three different tours through that, and then I closed out my career as a missing persons detective in homicide.
So you literally have seen big city law enforcement from the ground up, and now we're living, in a time where law enforcement is under attack. We have been demonized, we've been vilified, and now, especially for the last 3.5 years, we're having a difficult time not only retaining police officers, but recruiting new people to this profession. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, we used to recruit from three different groups, and the first group was the families. These were, the largest group that would bring legacy family members into the profession. People were considered destined to become a police officer when they were in middle school or junior high school. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew that they wanted to do that. And now we've had a enormous pullback of that group, and that first group, the families are intentionally discouraging people from joining the police department, and the percentages there are in the 90s, in the mid 90s, percentage wise. And then we're also facing a mass exodus of cops. I was hired. Somehow, some way, I was part of the 94 crime bill. There was just large agencies were able to take advantage of that. Then small agencies, they got all their officers scooped up by the larger agencies, and they had to backfill. So all these people are hitting retirement maturity dates right around now also, where people have the option, do I stay or do I leave? And in a hostile environment that we're living in today, where people can't count on their command staffs to back them up, and even facing prosecution for doing their job properly, there's no incentive for people to stay. So those people are leaving in droves also. And with that, they're setting the example for other people, saying, you need to think twice about this career, which compounds the fact that people are working so much more overtime. My prayers go out to all the people at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that have suffered such a tremendous loss in such a short period of time. But the stress of the business is no joke anymore, and it's not a rewarding career that people are encouraging their young folks to go into. In fact, during the last couple of years, I had some interns, and they were like, "I want to be a police officer," and I'm like, "Are you sure? Is there anything I could say to you right now that would make you say?" Because of course, when you're in that environment, when you're in the detective bay and all the people around there, the only thing that they know is like, you need to become a cop. But there's a whole other world out there And you know, a lot of people, especially Generation Z, is really embracing that.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be, I think it's going to take the profession a long time to recover from this. And I don't know, tell me what you see. I'm not sure law enforcement leadership really has their heads wrapped around this issue.
Oh, they certainly don't. And I'll tell you the other wrinkles that no one else is talking about with Generation Z is that 3 to 5 years down the road, who's going to be the sergeants? We're talking about 5 to 15 years farther down the road. You know, who are going to be the lieutenants and the captains at that point? Because even if we can get them in the door, even if we can bribe them to join, the fact is that if this isn't for them, if this culture doesn't welcome and receive them, and they don't see the opportunities here, they're going to take that full investment of training, either take it to a better agency or just leave the profession entirely. And so who is going to be that next wave? Because otherwise we are going, you know, our chain is going to be off the sprocket. We're going to be pedaling, but we're not going to be going anywhere if we don't figure out how to not just get these guys through the front door, but create a home for them, create a place for them to stay. And one of the dirty secrets is that we think we need X number of cops now. We probably need 1.25 per times the officers for the future, because what drives young officers, what drives the Generation Z officers that I've spoken to, is the opportunity to go to training. And you know, in small departments, I live in an area with a small department. You have 3 and 1, you know, on patrol at any given time. We can't minimum manning. We can't afford to send these people to 40 hours of training here but this guy who wants to be, you know, he wants to be domestic violence trained, DUI trained, he wants radar trained, and all these things are 40 to 80 hour class. I want to be an instructor, that's 80 hours. I want to be a driving instructor on top of that, it's another 40 hours. And you know, we can't get these guys out of there, and they're like, no problem, I'll go someplace that will let me do that. And I live in Florida, so it's really the best place. Our governor is paying incentives for officers from out of state to come down here and finish out their careers. So we don't have the staffing issues that we have the rest of the country, but it's still tough here.
Yeah, I do a lot of training in Florida, and I talk to those officers who have come from, you know, my native Illinois and so many other, you know, Midwestern states or from the East. And yeah, they all say, yeah, the pay's a little bit lower, but my chief loves me, the community loves me, and you know, I got a bonus so I could afford to move here. And do you think that's the future, you know, hiring bonuses and, you know, kind of copying that corporate America sort of blueprint to at least lure people in?
That's only going to work for people who are getting rehired. It's not going to work with Generation Z. Generation Z doesn't really, they value their time off more than they value their paycheck. And so when you start telling them, hey, you're going to have to work overtime this weekend, they're like, well, I'm going to leave it at the earliest opportunity that I can, because that doesn't fit in with my lifestyle. And we do see that time and time again, that and we have to accommodate that. But what we're also missing out on is the fact that Generation Z can bring so much to law enforcement. We're talking about a generation that's never known a time when they couldn't order a pizza on their phone, that they could do this. My wife actually ordered me a new set of tires for my truck and set the appointment and got road hazard by the time we got to the next traffic light one time. I mean, this is their age, and they know that. So when you tell them that they have to go over to this machine and do this, and then scan it, and then sign it, and then scan it again, and then copy it, and then fax it over to the jail, they're like, why can't I do that on my phone? And we need to be listening to them, because they do know a better way to do it. They do know they are going to advance the profession if we let them. But you know, if you tell them to go over there and just play on your phone, they will, because they want to see what their friends are doing and everything like that. But we've always done it like that. is probably going to be our biggest barrier to retaining staff for the future.
Now, while we are trying to retain cops, recruit new cops, we're dealing with 90s level crime in most of our urban areas. That's starting to seep into the suburbs and even into our rural areas. Talk about that. What are we going to do about violent crime in this country from a law enforcement perspective?
So last year, 2022, we had about 5,000 more murders nationally than we did in 2014. Now that is an extra Pearl Harbor and an extra 9/11 every year. Now we wouldn't tolerate that from a foreign power. So I don't know why we're deciding that we're going to tolerate that from our own streets. And, if we're going to do something about it, we need to take crime seriously, but the officers need that cover. I'll tell you, one of the chiefs I worked for, she wound up becoming a congressional representative, but she told her officers, you go out there and you do your job and have them send me the complaints. The complaints aren't going anywhere, but they're going to my desk first. And when you have leadership like that, you have courageous leadership that's gutsy and that's going to stand up for their officers, you're going to get results like that. But right now we have officers just being beaten in the streets of New York and with no backup from their administrations. And it's a national crisis to be seen. And we have it's just not worth it for cops anymore to go and approach strangers. They're vilified when they do any type of what's called proactive policing. Several cities around the country have decided to ban traffic stops. Now, if I don't have to have a license plate on my car, well, then why do I need to have insurance on my car? Well, then why do I need to have a driver's license at all? And it goes on and on and on like that until we do have complete disorder on the roads and a rising traffic fatality rate, which we're experiencing.
When you talk about that, I get so frustrated because there are, anti-drunk driving groups, anti-impaired driving groups that, they give law enforcement officers awards and things like that. But they won't address that traffic stop issue. We hear so much about that. Traffic stops, ridiculous things like traffic stops are racist and traffic stops are dangerous, this and that. Yeah, they're dangerous for us. But they're only dangerous for the public when the public resists. That's why the National Police Association has a public service announcement: comply now, complain later. And I don't know where do you think that whole traffic stop issue is heading, especially when we look at the violent crime issue in general around this country?
It's a swing of the pendulum, and we're going to see it swing back the other way, hopefully soon. But we actually have so many police departments that are in jeopardy of state and federal takeovers. Gavin Newsom rolled the California National Guard and the CHP into the streets of San Francisco. The Governor Abbott, wound up demanding that Texas DPS take a role in Austin, Texas, because Austin police were so depleted. Well, the state police are depleted too. But they're working the roads, and people are complaining about that. But they have the authority. And then in the Jackson, Mississippi, which was the murder capital of pretty much the world, it put Chicago and Baltimore and pardon me, it put Chicago, Baltimore, and St. Louis to shame. And they expanded the role of the Capitol Police. They expanded the Capitol Police jurisdiction in the capital city of Jackson to where it covers 3/4 of the city, where these guys can go. But of course, the people who get arrested there are going to go to a separate court and a separate jail. So it's receiving a lot of opposition in that respect too. But it is Patterson, New Jersey was taken over by the New Jersey Attorney General's office just because of these type of takeovers. Not to mention the consent decrees that are federal cottage industry that are going out and destroying police agencies.
And that's the thing. I don't know that people really understand the federal encroachment that we have into local law enforcement. And of course, we've had that for a long time. But now with this current administration, we see more and more of these consent decrees where basically, in layman's terms, a highly paid consultant gets an office in your police department and tells you, what policies you're going to have and this and that. And there's a theory that is, a precursor to an ultimate federal takeover of local law enforcement.
Well, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act has passed the House twice. And what it does is it does remove all of the federal agents in the United States are all subject to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act now, because they were able to do that by executive order. But they're not the ones that are going to the bar and breaking up fights, and they're not the ones who are, investigating traffic accidents and things like that. So it brings federal standards. It creates citizen review boards with subpoena powers and with the ability to write policy. So it's a disaster on all levels, and it's passed the House twice. So every time we have a high profile incident, like when we had the Memphis 5 case earlier this year, this thing keeps coming up like a bad penny. And we just lost a very important vote in the House of Representatives yesterday by 8 votes, and it was 8 Republicans that sided with Democrats on something. That's enough votes for this thing to pass the House again and be sent to the Senate for reconciliation. And it threatens the very nature of policing. We won't have policing as we know it if this thing passes.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and it's a frightening proposal. But it's not all bad news.
No.
There's something good happening in Georgia, and I've talked a lot about this in the media, and that is what people are dubbing Cop City. Antifa, who doesn't exist according to some, has been trying really hard to shut down a public safety training center outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And so far, there's been some really good cooperative law enforcement to stop that effort. Talk about that for a couple minutes.
Oh, I certainly will. Well, the idea that this is an environmental movement is a complete fraud. This is a land that they're calling themselves Defend the Atlanta Forest and Forest Defenders, but these are the same group that occupied the Wendy's after the shooting in 2020.
Right, of Rayshard Brooks.
The Rayshard Brooks shooting. So these are the same folks that were radicalized then, and now they've adopted this cause, and they've brought in a whole umbrella of other groups. But they've been there, firebombing construction equipment, setting motorcycles on fire, and terrorizing law enforcement officials. They were posting signs and doxing the state troopers that had been involved in the shooting of Torguita, and who had actually shot a Georgia State Patrol officer. So this whole thing has been convoluted in the media, and they've used that moniker of Cop City, and they're concerned about there being military style training, and that the lungs of Atlanta, this forest. But this is the old Atlanta Prison Farm, and there is no hardwood growth. There's just about 90 acres of invasive growth that have been developed there, and that they're fortunate to have a chief with a real backbone who said, "You're not going to do this to my officers anymore. We're going to come back at you strong." But the Georgia Bureau of Investigation really did a fantastic job of writing the blueprint on dismantling and defeating Antifa. It's their indictment has laid Antifa bare, and Antifa is just another arm of all the forces that are working against, in concert, established law enforcement in this country. They work to dismantle that. Now, when you and I look at the training center, we're like, this is going to be a regional asset that's going to benefit so many officers all around the state. People are going to come from far and near, and they're going to learn both fire rescue techniques and driving, shooting, and it's a resource. There's nothing. It's completely fabricated that this is going to be some sort of militarized thing, but they adopted this as a cause, and they're trying to do that on the West Coast also.
Well, and I think they're going to be probably ultimately more successful on the West Coast, because again, we have seen Antifa, they're part of Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter, and the group in Portland, of course, that tried to they constantly took over the federal courthouse and all that, and now they're involved in the anti-Israeli, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, pro-terrorism protests around this country.
And that's really separated the wheat from the chaff there, and it's really exposed some of these folks for who they are. The situation in the Middle East is tragic, but I hope that a few people's eyes are opened and they're seeing who is on what side.
Yeah, that's so absolutely astute. I wish we had about 3 hours to talk, but quickly tell people where they can find you, how they can subscribe to your Substack and follow you on social media.
Well, thank you so much. And I write the American Peace Officer Substack, and you find that at peaceofficer.substack.com. I'm also easy to find. Just type in Roland, Roland, Clee Policing in Google, and it'll pop right up. I've tested it works. In case you didn't want to do all that, I'm also on LinkedIn, and love to hear from you there, and on Twitter. And thank you so much.
Roland, thanks so much for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Ma'am, put the gun down! Put the gun down!
Last year, law enforcement officers were involved in hundreds of thousands of use of force incidents. A use of force incident is when an officer must use nonverbal tactics to gain control of a dangerous situation.
Put the knife on the ground.
In many cases, officers have no choice but to use force when a suspect doesn't comply with a lawful order.
Use of force is always ugly. No one likes it, especially police officers.
Together, we can help de-escalate these dangerous encounters. Help police officers by complying with their lawful orders. Don't attack, attempt to disarm, or flee from an officer.
Use of force is an officer's last option. Most incidents can be avoided by not resisting arrest.
If you feel you've been wrongfully detained by a police officer, then seek a legal solution after the encounter has been resolved.
Let's keep everyone safe. Comply now and complain later.